with
I
a
love it.
surprise for Emilio and everybody watching.
Yes.
Are you ready? Are you ready? Look what I
Yes.
got in the mail.
Ooh.
The first
Tell me
copies
more.
of Quitting by Design, the book I wrote like 2 years ago, finally.
Really?
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you very
That's
much.
amazing.
I came home to this Tuesday, and since the link is not up on Amazon yet, actually there is a link on Amazon. It just says it's out of stock or unavailable. I'm like, oh, I pre-sold out. Great, cool. I think that's an error. But until there's an active link, I'm keeping this under wraps. So this episode
Wow.
won't come out for a while. But
Mm-hmm.
anyway, I'm so excited
All in
about it.
divine timing. Yeah.
Indeed, indeed. I am so excited to have Emilio on the show today because Emilio and I met when I was in Austin about a month ago for the Realness Retreat. I stopped by the, and I'm going to butcher the name of this. Okay, what's the women's group that I went to that I'm?
Society of Women Entrepreneurs.
Society of Women Entrepreneurs. Yes,
Society of We. Yes.
Yes, exactly. My coach Colette invited me to that. And that's where we met. You were one of like 6 to 10 men at the Society of We. And I thought
If
that was,
yeah.
yeah, it was a small number of people. And I think within like the first 5 minutes of knowing you, I had heard your quit story and I was stoked. That's how I meet my kindred tribe. Anybody who hears what I do and then is like, here's my quit.
Yeah.
We're like people. So
Absolutely.
thank you so much for coming on and sharing. I just got to watch you trot around Austin on Instagram talking about your quit in preparation for this, which was awesome. So
Yes.
Emilio, if you could take us back to wherever you were before your first quit happened.
Yeah, absolutely. So first, again, thank you everyone for listening. Thank you, Lynn, for having me on the show. Very grateful for this. And so my first quit happened 3 years ago. Everything was changing in my life. Everything, at least at the time, I thought everything was like coming at me, that victim mentality of why is it happening to me, not for me type thing. And was in a toxic relationship. Everything, whether it be physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, in business life and relationships, there was a lot that it was attacking me. It was almost this like when it rains, it pours kind of situation. And at that point, it was almost like the pot was boiling, right? Like everything from a long period of time of being in oil and gas for about 10 years. So yeah, that's my past life is what I like to call it, was oil and gas. I was in Houston, Texas. Finance, accounting, consulting was all my past life. And I was good at what I did. It was lucrative, but it was not my purpose. It wasn't my passion. It was just one of those things like, okay, I'll get the finance degree because it's going to make some money. And what's next? Okay, then do I do CFA? And what's next? Then do I go do this? And it was like, what's next? And it's just like going through the motions and not really looking in and just saying, what I truly want to be doing the rest of my life. And on my deathbed, like Brendan Burchard would say, did I live? Did I love? Did I matter? And that'll come later here in the show. But it all started really starting to boil when I was in a toxic relationship 3 years ago, of 3 years. And there was a lot going on at that time. I was like with some toxic friends, was with some toxic relationships. I was doing some oil and gas consulting, kind of traveling Monday through Thursday, back and forth from Houston to Denver, Colorado. And things were great in one sense and not so much. It was very much, I was wearing masks, right? I was being fake and I was very much in my ego self, like all the ego self, like I'm not good enough. I don't have enough, but also I'm better than, and everything. And really wearing these masks, living other people's lives in terms of like what society or what Instagram or what social media would deem to be, wow, he's living an awesome life, when actually behind closed doors, I was not, and yeah, so it all really kind of ignited. The catalyst was, I've never, anything in my life, and I don't say this in an egoic way, it's just given the way that I was raised and grown up, I was like the oldest, was the first one to go to college. Saw a lot of people suffering when I was young and really kind of had this grit and passion and drive. So like anything that I wanted to do in life, I knew that I would get it, because I was going to make sure that my mind, body, spirit was going to be so focused, I'd just get it done. And at that point in my life, 3 years ago, I was very much like that. However, what got me there wasn't going to get me, that whole quote about what got me here won't get you there. And the things that I was normally doing just wasn't working anymore. And so what ignited what was the catalyst for the quit was I got fired from my consulting, gig. It was just this one day. I remember waking up. I was in Denver, Colorado, and it was Thursday. I was about to fly back to Houston, and I get a text from the product the manager, and saying of the project, saying, "Hey, can you stop by my office before you leave back to Houston?" And it's like one of those things, like, oh crap! Like I kind of knew it before it happened, and there was lots of reasons as to why that might happen, because, I'd been going through all this stuff about like maybe not being present there. I thought I was like Mr. Cool and I knew everything. And I think that it's just a combination of everything that I think led up to this point. And, it brings me to my office, and it's just so cut and dry. It was a product manager, other product manager. And I thought I was better than that guy. And it probably showed in various ways. Like I was horrible. It was bad. And definitely not who I am at the core. And so anyways, raw and real, it was not my best self. And yeah, he just says, "Hey, Emilio, today's going to be your last day, and I need you to pack up everything. And, thanks for everything you did." And that's it. I don't even think he said thanks for everything you did, right? It was just like, we need you to pack up, and that's that. And, of course you take it personally, and I'm like, what, everything was like crashing down, because it was like, this was doing really well. And my masks were so well. And everyone was like, "What are you doing, Emilio?" Like I had literally tripled my income going from corporate America to consulting, and was like living the quote unquote high life. And then I got fired, and I was like, I've never been fired. Like, whoa. And it was that whole thing though, as it started to marinate and process, which I'll talk about, it was almost like that Marcus Aurelius, the obstacle is the way, right? That what stands in the way becomes the way. And this whole time, even like a couple months afterwards, I was still trying to like get the next job. And then there was more jobs available, but something kept pushing me the other way. Like, hey, you're going to keep hitting this wall. Life's saying, God's saying, go this way. And I finally learned. And so that was kind of the catalyst. And that's what really started my journey. I ended up going to, are you familiar with like the Bulletproof Biohacking Conference?
Absolutely. Pasadena.
Yeah. So in I think it was, this was in 2015, the October one in Pasadena. That was, during the toxic relationship, I was going to go there, and I had been following kind of Dave Asprey at the time, and Bulletproof and all these kind of human potential, high performance type of ways. And went there, met a lot of people, was very much in the doing phase at this point in my life. I feel like there's a lot of like doing, then being, then allowing, and that there's a whole kind of topic there. But I went there, met a lot of people, it was great. I ended up then, learning a lot, found I wanted to get certain certifications. There was a Bulletproof coaching certification that I was interested in that I ended up going into. There was a mind, like a MBSLA. It's like an objectively brain-based assessment for executives that I could take. And I was learning a lot about neuroscience, basically just starting to really kind of become like in training. So like the toxic relationship at this point was I was separating myself, and just started to kind of like physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually start to prepare. So I started to do things like, do holosync meditation. I started to do cold thermogenesis, learn about neurofeedback and exogenous ketones and like cold thermo, just all these things to almost like distract me from this toxic relationship and really concentrate on myself, because I was like not wanting to deal with that at the time. And it was so toxic. I remember, my goodness. But, in other words, that was just a catalyst for the change. And so that's where quit happened. There's a lot that came from that. The way that I'll kind of, maybe solidify this or wrap up this quit happens to maybe kind of take it further is, Tony Robbins, and I said this on my Instagram before coming, it's so near and dear to my heart, because I remember he has this famous quote. And so for those of you who don't know, it's, he talks about taking the island. He says, let's say you're on a boat and you see the island, and the island representing your dreams, your passions, your desires. And if you want to take that island, he talks about burn your fucking boats. Excuse me for my language, but that's what he says. Yeah. And so I ended up doing that. So, from October, November, December, when I was in this training, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, kind of almost preparing to quit the bad toxic friends, to quit the toxic relation, to quit not continuing oil and gas, there was a lot of reflection that I did, a lot of deep inner work that I did, or at least the beginning of what I'm about to kind of continue with. But it all started kind of like with this quote that really summarizes all this up. And I burnt my boats in so many ways. Burnt the toxic relationship, ended up quitting that. Burnt certain friends that weren't serving me anymore, right? Because you are who you hang around with. Burnt, just the lifestyle that I was living. Burnt like the ego, false self, like at least starting to shed the light, like, wow, like looking at myself finally and my inner demons, if you will. And then quitting this this amazing condo that I had, and quitting all this stuff, and really saying, because when I ended it, it was at the end of the year of 2015 in December. I was by myself in January before really, and this is like 3 years. So like from burning my boats in all those ways, I became a nomad for 3 years, humbling myself through sleeping on various friends' couches for 3 years.
Wow.
Like for 3 years, sleeping on friends' couches and going back home, and life really hitting me hard and saying, like, humbling me hard and showing me a lot of lessons that I needed to learn before gaining the responsibility that I know that I wanted to be able to impact a lot of people. And I wasn't ready back then. And there was a lot that I had to learn these past 3 years. So the past 3 years was me swimming, if you will, to my island. And my island is Austin. And I arrived here in January of this year. And that whole time, I was swimming and learning all the lessons, all the pain. And so, yeah, it was very scary and ugly and just transformational 3 years that really changed my life in so many ways. And I'm so grateful for all of that pain, being kind of one of the best teachers. And so, yeah, there's a lot of details that we can dive into and whatnot, but essentially that's kind of like where quit happens. And then, in the 3 years I was essentially swimming to my island, and here I am. And yeah.
Yeah. I will definitely ask you many questions. I'm going to say, are your earphone things hitting the microphone? The earphone cord there? Something's hitting the microphone.
Maybe. Okay. I'll be cognizant of that.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. You're right. So many questions. Okay. Let's take it back to before you got fired. You were in this job. You knew you had no passion for it. It was not fulfilling your purpose, which maybe you did or didn't even know what your purpose was at the time, right? A lot of us don't wake up one day knowing what our purpose is. Like, who doesn't want to leave the world a better place than they started? But, I don't think in your 20s, not to generalize, but many people in their 20s are just like trying to, like you said, live other people's lives, fulfill those societal goals. And because it's a time to show, hey, I'm independent. I got out of college and now I can make this on my own. Look at how much money I can make and the fancy cars I can get and whatever. And our purpose is somewhere hidden behind all that, as we are, like you said, not living our own lives, just kind of living what we think everybody else should. So you're at that point. Did you think, hey, I would like to quit this? Or was there, had you not gotten fired, would you have just kept doing that for the foreseeable future?
Yeah. So that when I say, I got fired, that kind of was the last, the water was boiling at that point, to where a couple months later, there was a lot of opportunities for me to jump back into consulting. No big deal. Consulting is very much like that. You get off on a project, you get on a project. But that's when it was okay, the water's boiling. I could easily jump and continue to make great money and do what I was normally doing. Or I can really say, okay, this obstacle is the way. I'm not happy. There's so many things falling apart in my life for the good. I didn't see it like that back then. And where I chose to consciously quit and not take the opportunities to go into some. I was going to actually go to Singapore and to other places and go travel, which I love, and all this kind of stuff. So I really looked deep and did a lot of reflecting, a lot of meditating, and a lot of the stuff that I took from the biohacking conference and more, to say, okay, I'm not going to take these amazing opportunities that are here for me, and I'm going to choose to, take I had about from 10 years. And I wish I thought, I'm going to just be raw and real. I thought I would maybe save more in my retirement. And I wish I would have put more, especially as a finance major, but I didn't. From 10 years, you should have had more, but it was about 100,000 plus, in the retirement account that I'd gathered. And whether or not that may be a lot to somebody, people or not, financially speaking, like you could do a whole lot more to compound that, but that was my financing speaking of, especially with 10 plus years. But anyway, as a finance major at that time, I would not advise this, but I took out all of that. And I said, I'm going to take a year off because I said, time is our number one asset. Like, I'm never going to get this back. Like, what if I spent 24/7 not like quitting my oil and gas and spending like, what do I really want to do? Finding my purpose, finding my passion, finding my values. Like a lot of people don't know what's important to them, their values. They don't know what life is asking of them, their vocation, you know, and all this kind of stuff. And so I said, I need to find that. Like you said, I didn't know it at the time. And I need to do that. So yeah, so I like took everything out of my savings and invested in myself. And so, yeah, so that's when it happens, when I decided not to take those opportunities.
Yeah, I adore the way you said invested in yourself, because as a finance major, you were probably the last person that would advise that, right? To the other, you know, to anybody else who would ask, what should you do with your retirement? But it's such an important move. And I'm sure you have heard Tim Ferriss tell this story, right? Any money that he was going to spend on graduate school, which I think was like $200,000, he invested and just played with it to like learn how to invest. And that's exactly what you did. You know, first off, no graduate school tells you what your purpose is. You have to find that on your own. And that's the best way to do it. And what's that 100,000 to you, which would have granted been a little more by the time you retired, but what good is that if you've spent an entire life not fulfilling your purpose and living totally out of alignment? And then, what, you get to go on like a cruise or so, like whatever people do with 100,000 at age 65, you know, it's so much more valuable the way you spent it. And I think a lot of people have a huge fear around doing that kind of thing with their finances. But as I've had guest after guest say on here, you can't necessarily search for your passion. You need to just work on yourself and it will appear.
Yes. I love that. And it's so true. Like, you know, it will appear. And I think that goes into, you know, the more I think in a lot of the things that we read and go to conferences on or doing this self-development work, and in a sense, it's just like, you know, removing all that programming from, you know, I'm like, who was I before my mom and dad created me physically in this form here? And, you know, when I just completely moved, so with all the deep inner work, all the 3 years of swimming, and we can dive into maybe the things that I did or whatever, but at the end of the day, it's just removing all that and being still with myself. I'm a big fan of this, the quote, you know, like, be still and know that I am God. Quote that just resonates with me, because when I'm still, and it took a while to actually being able to say that and then find the dancing within the stillness, to be able to find the happiness and peace and fulfillment that's always there. And the answers that really come up, like you said, but it's a matter of like getting like all that noise, all this stuff out and just saying, okay, what's coming up? And of course, this is at a high level talking, but that does very much happen, and definitely a big fan of that.
Yeah, I was just listening. When you mentioned back to the biohacking conference, the Bulletproof conference, and you talked about the fact that in that period you were doing a lot. And it is no coincidence. I happen to have just been listening to Wellness Force before we got on here, and he has on a guest whose name I am going to forget. Josh
Trent. Love that guy.
Josh I would never forget.
Oh, sorry.
Josh is one of my closest friends, but the guest's name I don't remember. Former soccer player. I will put it in the show notes. But they were talking about the fact that they were just discussing things that we do to kind of reach out when we're feeling this inner turmoil or whatever. It may be shopping, it may be food, it may be, you know, sex or porn or gambling, whatever it is. But something that you brought up that I think is important to touch on, and you and I are in a what's not growing community of biohackers. And I think at least when I started, for all you in the podcast listening world, we're all like flashing our Aura rings that
I know.
I'll also link to in the show notes. No affiliate, don't worry. Call me Aura. Yeah. I love it. But I think at least when I got into biohacking in about 2010 or 11, but I think a lot of that time I was doing little things was a lot of, like you said, the doing. And for me, when things would get turmoil-ish, and this is what they were talking about in the podcast, a lot of these things, even shopping, it gives you some modicum of control. you reach out to, okay, I
Yeah.
can control when I'm shopping. I'm buying this, I'm doing that. I can control what I'm eating. And that's also why a lot of people have like eating disorders, because
Hmm.
they can control the fact that they're not eating. And I think biohacking is beautiful and great when used properly, but it also is a lot of doing that can be used as kind of a distraction for like, so
Hmm.
I'd be going through some tough times and I'm like, oh, let me just do some cold thermogenesis, I'll try a cold shower, I'll do this thing, and then I'll get in the sauna, and like you said, at the end of the day, those are super
Hmm.
helpful, but only if you're using them to further yourself and not to keep recovering and like using them as symptomatic treatment for this other thing that
Yeah.
you're not dealing with. It's much deeper.
Right. Yeah. And then on the biohacking space too, a lot of people, I remember I was being asked like, hey, what is biohacking? Because there's certain people like, I don't get it. And there's like, in the full spectrum of biohackers, there's like people here, here, and here. And of course, I'm showing like the beginning, middle, and maybe end of like the really hardcore one, somewhere in the middle. And the reason I say that is, there's this, in bulletproof coaching, when I was doing that all of 2016, getting the certification anyway, like there was this definition that really resonated. It was systematically influencing your biology, your psychology, and your environment in an effort to understand what enables you to perform at your very best. And even that, people are like, well, what does that even mean? It's like, well, essentially just learning to know you better so you can be better. At least when I kind of sum it up, like at the end of the day, like, why am I doing all this stuff? It's because I want to be a better human being for my loved ones, for my family, for strangers, for my clients, all of that. And to be able to live life fully and embrace my hero's journey, and I think that's what biohacking, that's what some of the certifications, that's what some of this swimming in the water to reach my island has taught me, not only in the doing, but then finding that, through the biohacking, I almost was able to, once I was able to control my biology, whether it was through the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, meaning like, whether it was like nootropics, cold thermogenesis, all that we're talking about, or meditation or reflection or whatever, it ended up, my biology and psychology was aligned more to where things became a lot more clear. And when I reflected or meditated, those answers started to arise. And so then I really started to be able to peel back the layers a lot more efficiently and effectively to essentially reach like, who am I truly? So biohacking helped with that. And then through that journey was able to just kind of be more like, wow, I'm comfortable in my own skin, finally removing all these things that didn't serve me and the things that I was fearful of. Right. And then of course the next transition for me being just like allowing things to happen. Like you could water a plant so much and put it in the sun so much. It's like, allow it to grow. It's going to grow. Like, don't overwater it.
Right. Ooh, that's a great metaphor, because I was just thinking back to when this was like 2016. I was trying to do ketogenesis. Sorry for everybody that we're just going to nerd out for a second, but I was trying to, live this keto lifestyle and meditate and journal. And then any free moment I had, I got my face in like the Bulletproof cookbook or Abel James cookbook or the paleo
Mm.
diet. And I was, what you said, like overwatering the plant to the
Mhm.
point that biohacking, all these things that I was doing, this information, overload that I was subjecting myself to, was creating a ton of anxiety itself, which was completely counter, any good I was
Yeah.
doing with the biohacking was completely undone by the fact that like my cortisol level was always up here. Like, am I doing the right diet? Am I following the right this and the right protocol? And and like you can overdo those things, like you said.
Mm.
So I think that's a big lesson from what you just said, is get enough information to get your physical and mental health in order, and then be,
Yes.
and
Yes.
realize that the doing, the doing can end up undoing you at some point. Just be.
For sure. For sure. And it's like, yeah. And I mean, what I mean by being, just for people are like, well, hey, what does that mean? Just being like, I'm just, for instance, through that 3 year swimming, through that 3 year biohacking, through that 3 year deep inner work and what have you, you know, again, when I said, I understood my biology and psychology through some of this biohacking, to where, again, things became more clear when I reflected or meditated or what have you. I was able to peel back the onion, if you will, more efficiently and effectively to see what arose in that moment. And, those things, I was able to find what I call shadows. I do a lot of men's work. And for those people who don't know shadow work, it's the things we hide, suppress, and deny about ourselves. And one of my shadows was this like Superman shadow is what I called it. And it was like, I was always doing, like trying to do so much. People were like, wow, you're such a high performer and doing and all this kind of thing. And it's like, yeah, but when I became more conscious through all this stuff that we're talking about, if you peel back the onion, like what was behind all that was that I didn't feel like I was good enough. So I wanted to like do so much so that I felt like I was good enough, like, you know, to myself, to people, to where at the end of the day, it's like, wow, that subconscious shadow finally became so present. You know, I kind of kept shining the light on it, kept bringing awareness to it, and which is part of biohacking in a sense. A lot of people don't know that that's part of it as well. That, wow. And so that's when I was finally able to just like take a deep breath, relax, release through certain work that I've done and say, you know, to really feel like I was good enough. And when you really are able to embody that and really release and let go of these things, then people are like, wow, like you're different. Like I didn't need to prove myself. I didn't need to say I was like, how are you doing, man? You know, it wasn't about me. And just people are like, wow, it was just being me. Like I'm like, you know, everyone listening, like you are exactly where you need to be. Like you have everything you freaking need. You have everything. Like when you remove everything, like you are everything. Wow, yeah, seriously. Like when you remove everything, you are everything. And I think when you feel that and know that, that's when you're really being. That's what I mean by just being. You emanate and provide these like magneticism, like to people, and people feel that. So I don't know. When I say being, some people were telling me recently, like, what do you mean by that? And that's maybe a glimpse.
Well, I appreciate that. And I'm going to guess that the Superman shadow that you described just resonated with like 90% of everybody listening to this show, right? Like if you're here, you're probably some kind of high performer, and first up, you may just be my friend. That's why you're listening to this show. Thank you for all those people. But a lot of people, you know, they're high performing. They're like, okay, what can I quit that would up level my life? And a lot of the quitting that helps is quitting those shadows, and you can't just
Yeah,
quit them. You have to work through them. You have to identify them and work through
100%.
them. And that Superman shadow, I've never heard that. I mean, you probably called it that yourself. Like that's
For
the name you
sure.
gave
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah.
But that is genius because so many people are using it's another form, like you said, of the doing. Let me do and do and do to cover up this hole I have inside, which will never work.
Yeah,
You have to stop doing, realize there's a hole. You know, you
yeah,
you can't realize there's something there when you spend all your time trying to cover it up,
yeah.
and then address it. Okay, that was so valuable. All right,
Mhm.
let's get to what went on in your swimming period. What kind of fears did you have, and how did you get over those, and whatever you think would be valuable from that period?
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So, so many things. I'm trying to figure out what I would love to share, and I always kind of pause because in every present moment, um, whether it be the audience or podcast, whatever I'm on, you know, seeing what would resonate. And it's not necessarily from the head. I like try to go to my heart and gut, right? Because in neuroscience, by the way, like I learned that we have, you know, a couple of years ago that we have a head brain, a heart brain, and a gut brain, like literally. And a lot of people don't know that we have like these different operating systems and that a lot of things come from each of them. And so, kind of reaching that level now. One of the so what's coming up for me right now are really five to kind of summarize that swimming the things that I've learned were really five foundational principles that I stand on now. And it really kind of bleeds into this energy and resilience conversations and speaking engagements that I do now and will continue to do the rest of my life. And before I really relay what those five principles are that I learned, I'll start off by saying, especially because I was swimming, I love this quote, and I've made it my own to where it says, life is like the ocean. There's always going to be waves. And the good news is that you can learn how to surf. And I love that. I tried surfing a few years ago, loved it, didn't know I was going to love it that much. But here's the thing, like there's a lot of people drowning out there, don't know a wave's about to come, don't know it's about to hit them, and don't necessarily know how to handle a wave coming, whatever that may be, whether it's with toxic relationships or business or life, what have you, or a loss of someone, whatever it is. I want to be able to give people a surfboard, right? Being those tools, resources, tips, etc., people, community. And when I was swimming, I didn't have that surfboard, you know, you know, I ended up acquiring my surfboard, if you will. And the surfboard are these 5 Ps. And those 5 Ps are presence, purpose, power, people, and preparation. And to kind of give some insight as I kind of dive deeper into what happened with the swimming, I'll kind of give a little quick overview of really what those mean, and then maybe some things, details, things that I did and what I learned through that. So here it is, presence. We've heard about this a lot. I feel like probably your audience as well, right? The number one human impediment is that we live in our heads with this constant ego-centered, I'm not good enough, I don't have enough, or I'm better than, like we talked about earlier. Constantly in the past, we're in the past because our stories are running us, depression, or we're in the future, hoping, wishing, praying, or maybe even afraid of what may come next, which is anxiety to me.
Mm-hmm.
But all we ever have is this very present moment that we're sharing right now. And I feel like everyone is constantly up here, like, what am I going to say next? We're constantly up here judging people or judging themselves and not self-loving themselves. They're constantly up here, like all the time, myself included at times. I just know faster when I'm up there. And so like, if we're up here, then we're not here. And not present to obviously the beauty that constantly is around us. Like I was on Instagram earlier, right before the show, like talking about the ripples in the water. Like I love the simple things in life, and they mean so much more because of this deep inner work. So I think once people become more present to the present moment and are gracious for the good and the bad, I don't even think about it as good and bad, right? It's just data. There's just thinking makes it so in my mind. And so I think life gets a lot easier, and you really start to see the lessons kind of happening here and there in your life. So really being present. And that was one of the main kind of ones going forward. The second one being purpose. And again, I didn't know, a lot of people, and I'll just speak personally, like I didn't know what was important to me, my values, or what life was asking of me, my vocation. And a lot of people don't, from statistically speaking, and talking to people all my life. And once you find out what's important to you, your values, or what's life asking of you through all this deeper work, then life gets a lot easier, right? When you have a purpose, something bigger driving you, when you wake up, like, what's your why? Why are you doing all this stuff? Because I was going through the motions like a lot of people were. And once I had this purpose, by the way, my purpose is it's really my vision, which is to end our internal suffering by instilling resilience into humanity. I feel like that's the antidote to suffering. I saw a lot of suffering growing up as a kid, whether it be my father, my mother, my sister, immediate family members, and I wanted to help. That was one of these burning desires that was with me all my life until I finally decided, hey, I'm going to stop helping businesses and I'm going to start helping people. How do I do that? And that was that 3-year journey of swimming. And so, when I was able to find that, okay, here, reflecting and meditating, doing certain exercises that came from bulletproof coaching training, heart math coaching training, Rich Litvin intensives, all these kind of things of doing these uncomfortable things that allowed me to just like release and let go of all these things to really find who I was. That purpose started to arise, like you were alluding to earlier, Lynn. And like, again, you got to do the work. And I ended up doing that. And that's that purpose. Next P, being power, is regaining my power back. But, not in an egoic way anymore. It was more of just like finding my power so that I can help people and how I can do that. And of course, that was physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Big part of that was biohacking, right? Like, what are the, food, supplementation, technologies, services that I can acquire? How can I be better at sleep and energy? How can I, all that stuff on a physical basis, but also mental, started doing the neurofeedback and, again, holoseek meditation, which are the binaural beats, and, the emotional stuff, especially a lot, when people think about power, this is actually one of the biggest ones that I think is that emotional intelligence that's really kind of coming up a lot nowadays of, what the shadows I was talking about earlier, right? We tend to suppress, hide, and deny all these things, and especially our emotions, like, oh, I don't want to face this fear that I was having. And I'll talk about that because you want me to talk about that, right? So it was fear of like,
you don't have to. This is all extremely valuable. And for everybody talks about their fears. You can just talk about your pillars.
Yeah. So like, yeah. And that emotional stuff. So it was this, one of my biggest things that I learned, like some of the simplest things can be the biggest things. It's like, I started to say, when I was more aware of like the bad habits that I was doing, or more aware of, when fear was arising, or when anything, or my ego was arising, whether it was I'm not good enough, I don't have enough, or I'm better than, or what have you, I would stop and say, smile to myself first, because that shows some self-love, which I needed. I didn't know at the time. And internally just tell myself like, I'm glad you're here. Or no, I'm sorry. Like, there's me doing it again. Like there's you doing it again. There's you doing it again. And just like repping it, like making that muscle big of like, there's me doing it again, until that muscle was so big to where it's like, okay, not doing that anymore. Cause I was able to move that away. And then, I often talk about this. This is so awesome. Cause I think a lot of people know this a lot, but it's like, how do you do it? And it's like, when I talk about the stories in the head, right? We fuse to those stories. Emotions arise from those stories. And the next thing you know, we've created our own suffering. And it's like, you just created that story and you fused to it. And then you created, I'm like, what? And of course, we do that. And so instead, when the emotions would come up, whether it be fear, anger, sadness, frustration, or what have you, guilt, shame, I just take a deep breath and say, I'm glad you're here. Like, open the door, like, welcome to the party. And, in that moment, I found out that was, that diffused what, because when you suppress it and put it underneath the covers and just kind of put it down, like it starts to like come up, like, so to conclude that emotional intelligence thing, it's like the power that I got from that was those emotions that I didn't want to address they were running my life. And the moment I said, oh, come in, hey, I love you, shame and guilt and fear, and fantastic. Here we are. What do I need to learn from this? And welcomed it. Then by doing that, I took power back. And my emotions weren't running me, right? And so that was a big thing for me when it comes to power. So power in all those quadrants. and so that's really that power piece of all those things that I started to gather through a lot of this. And the next P being being the fourth P is people. I think we're in a day and age right now that people are craving connection and community. And I think Will Smith came up with this song or this challenge or something. It was like a connection challenge, because he talks about like, we have all this technology where it connects us. Yes. Why are we feeling so lonely? Like, why are we still not feeling connected? And I want to connect people, like, because during this 3-year journey, I was able to connect to myself more, connect to people more, connect to the earth more, connect to God more, or universe or source, whatever you want to call it. I like to call it God. And, whatever you call it is fine. It's just like, I was able to feel that. And it's such an amazing feeling. Like, people may call it like, oh, it's so woo-woo and this and that. But like, when you really do it, you're going to become this woo-woo too, because you're going to feel it. You're like, oh my gosh, I get it. And it's like, okay, I feel the woo-woo. So
embrace the woo.
Woo, yeah, embrace the woo. And so yeah, I want to build that tribe, right? Of and there's so many tribes, and it's fantastic. And let's integrate all of them and be the rising tide that lifts all boats, And so that, to really that really encompasses that people piece. And then of course, preparation, last but certainly not least, after you've acquired a lot of these things, I've acquired a lot of these things, I was able to really have a mindset and kind of preparation for those waves to come. There's always going to be waves. The good news is that you can learn how to surf these waves which is like stress, challenges, adversity. I knew they were coming. I was conscious of when they were coming. I had all these pillars in place to be able to get on my surfboard that I finally acquired to really ride the wave. And what's really cool is that and I'm learning this even more so now, is that, when the waves crash at me, like fall down, because nature will shut you up sometimes and knock you down, but it's beauty. It's like beauty in the struggle, beauty in the fall. There's so much beauty in that. And in a way, you're so much more connected with that. When I was like crying in the shower, or like in the park somewhere, like at 3 a.m, or like in various things, like pouring out my soul and just like, what the heck, 3 years ago, it's just like, it was like, I had nothing. And in that there was everything. And it was almost like you just felt it. And it was so connected. So it's like on the time, and whenever I'm in there again, I'm going to be so thankful, because it's like, what are those lessons? So when the wave crashes, okay, what are the lessons here? This is beauty. Like, this is the training. This is a training. Like, everything to me is training. Like, okay, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. So when I'm on that wave, when I crash, awesome. Wow, that was a crazy crash. I'm alive. I'm still breathing. Fantastic. What is the lessons here? And then, of course, when I'm on the surfboard like I am now, thank God, and just very grateful for that here in Austin, my island, is like being grateful for that, and saying, and really being present, and saying, and enjoying all the beauty, right? Because when for anybody who's ever surfed, when you're catching the wave, you're in flow. You're seeing everything so much more beautiful. There's no time. There's just, wow. And so preparing for those waves, preparing for the good and the bad, the ups and the downs. And so that's preparing. And so now when I'm on my island, I feel like life, God, universe, source, whatever is going to be testing you. And so everything that I learned through these 3 years, they've come at me in relationships. They've come at me in business. They've come at me when I'm by myself. And I was like, oh, there it is. And I was like, man, my muscle of doing all these 5 pillars is so strong. I was like, I'm not going to do that. And was able to just like one after the other, like, wow, I would have normally done that. Wow, I normally would have been stressed there. Wow, I normally would have reacted there. Wow, normally, I would have been fearful there. And I choose faith over fear. Like all these things started to like come up to where life is testing me now. And I'm able to constantly step up and level up because of these foundational P's and principles that I now live by and preach upon, to we're able to continue to get back on that surfboard over and over and over again.
Ooh, I'm just going to let that all sink in. That's incredible. I love it. There were so many things in there. I'm like scribbling notes furiously, but you just re-listen to Emilio saying all that. That was amazing. One of the favorite, the things that you said that was my favorite was that thinking makes it so.
Yeah.
And I was just, because every week I do a Facebook Live, and this week I was going to talk about almost just what you said, is that, waves are going to come, and it's literally just how you think about them that determines their effect on you. An example is like, I got this like pre-skin cancer thing on my face, because if you want to go with everything happens for a reason, then that starts to generally teeter and fall a little bit more apart, or you would think, in the health world. Somebody gets cancer, gosh, what's the reason for that? So I had this skin cancer scare on my face last year. It was like a pre-cancer. They burn it off. It leaves, a little scar. It comes back. This happens 3 times. And by the end, like they said, okay, we're going to burn it off one more time, or freeze it off. They're technically freezing it. They're like, or you're going to have surgery on your face. Right. And it's like right here. It is not like in a subtle place. And they freeze it, and it leaves such this terrible, scar while it's healing, that I like do the thing where I'm, in my ego, embarrassed about it, and I start picking it off, and it leaves a scar. It leaves a scar that's probably much worse than it would have had I just let it go.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And every time that I see that scar, like a little piece of me wants to tell the story, like, why did you do that? Why were you so in your ego? Like there's this negative story that comes up. And then there's another story that I write on top of it, which is like, now that you have a visible scar, you remember to put sunscreen on every day. It's like it's totally how you look at it. I could also look at it like, wow, I have a very small scar. I almost had face surgery. It would have been a significantly larger chunk of my face. Like this one thing could have 1,000 stories written about it. And that whole, everything happens for a reason, or you said earlier, you're right where you're supposed to be. If somebody wants to challenge that, how well, and it's funny because I've had somebody on the not at all woo side come to say, well, if I'm always right where I'm supposed to be, why would I ever manifest something? Because then that's me trying to make myself be in another place. Which place am I supposed to be? And I thought, well, from a very left-brained standpoint, those are kind of mutually exclusive. But in the, and if you want to go ahead and do rhetoric and philosophy, great, you can go discuss that ad nauseum. But I think where we're coming at it from is the self-improvement, self-development. And what do we want it at any point in time is to be content with our present moment, right? Mm-hmm. And what's going to help you be more content with the present moment? Like the story that you're telling yourself that this present moment is where I'm supposed to be, or the story you tell yourself, like in Byron Katie's work, like, oh no, this is not where I'm supposed to be. Like she says, that's the root of all distress, is when you're thinking that what is not what should be. Yeah. And that's not going to help your stress level. It's not going to help your development. So whatever story is, aside from delusional stories, but whatever story is more helpful to you, thinking that and making it so that you can be content with your present moment is I think an effective tool.
Absolutely. And I think what one word kept coming up for me right now is, and I tend to blend all these things because I feel like life, us, nature, the world is just so complex and a beautiful thing and so integrated that it's not like a black or white. There's different shades. There's a rainbow of colors with all this stuff that blend in and out, however in which ways you see it along your journey. And one word that was coming up was this surrender. And so I'll talk about surrender, and I'll talk about the manifestation you brought up. Yes, to me, and the things that I've learned, you know, with, and by the way, I'm like this, I've been a self-development junkie since I was in 5th grade at Barnes and Nobles, like in the self-help section, because of like my childhood and how I grew up and not wanting to become like what the environment was. And so from that, kind of fast forwarding to now and like what I'm sharing, it's like, it's just my story. It's like, you know, some things resonate, some things don't. And it's like we're all kind of standing on the shoulders of giants presenting this information. And sometimes it hits, sometimes it doesn't. But so I don't want to come at this as like, I know everything type of thing. It's just, you know, I'm coming more of just like, this is just a sharing and not like I know everything and people don't kind of thing. Right. Like I always want to bring that up because it's like, by no means do I ever want to come across that way. It's just a sharing of what I've seen work and what has been beautiful. And that leads me into like the lifestyle that I choose to live, which is surrendering, but yet still manifesting and being, doing, and allowing. So all those things are the integrated points that I'm talking about. And so to bring it home with all these integration points is like, okay, I can, you know, meditate, I can say affirmations out loud, I can pray, I can do gratitude exercise, I can do all this stuff to do manifestation exercises, to put it out there into the universe, right? But at the same time, then letting go of that and surrendering. So I can do all the do's to manifest and everything. Then I'm just going to be so that I can enjoy life fully and embrace my hero's journey. And then I'm going to allow it to bloom and to arrive wherever it arrives. And that's where I talk about this being like water. Like I'm much more like nature. Like, I don't know if you've read the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. I didn't read it specifically, but it was by Wayne Dyer. It's called Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life. And it's a translation of the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. And what he talks about there too is like not only being like nature, like water, like flowing wherever it flows. Like, but one of the main things that I pulled from there that I think will wrap this in a nice little bow is, and I don't think he says it like this, but I came from Houston. There was a lot of hurricanes there. So like, I think palm trees, for instance. And let's say there's a storm happening, okay? And there's a lot of storms that are happening in people, like internally and externally with life, business relationships, what have you. And I always think about being the eye of the storm. And in that eye of the storm where it's calm is this palm tree. And I'm getting somewhere here, I promise. A lot of stuff here is this is all the integration points. This is all going to come together. And it's like, if you're so stiff in your ways, this is the way it is, I'm just going to manifest. How can you have both? Like, no, it's not all this stuff. It's just this and that. Man, if you start to just like relax and surrender and not be so stiff, because if you think about it, what breaks in storms and hurricanes? Like the trees that are stiff, that don't move, they're just stiff. Those are the ones that break. Like they just wind, nature will snap it. Same thing with you. If you don't ebb and flow with what nature, what life is throwing at you, meaning just let go, surrender, be like a palm tree. Like, you know, see like what's happening, like sway away and see what's happening. Like, why is it turning me this way? Why is it turning me that way? You know, what are the lessons here? And just kind of ebbing and flowing and not taking things personally, just relaxing and breathing and meditating, reflecting on everything that you're going. Then you do not break. You tend to like, life becomes more interesting because you're not controlling it. But like if I controlled my entire life, it'd be boring. Like it's awesome when you let go and it's like, whoa, now I'm going over here and I didn't expect to go there. So I think in being that palm tree or flowing like water, like nature, you have this being able to surrender, but also being able to manifest, right? That manifest being like, okay, this is the doing stuff. I'm going to do everything to do to manifest this stuff. Then I'm going to let go, be the palm tree and just be, and let me sway. And during that process, that kind of water flowing down, you just kind of allow it to flow. And where it goes is exactly where it needs to go. And it's going to be, life gets so much more beautiful. And you're like, wow, I didn't know I was going to be here. Didn't know I was going to have these relationships. Didn't know I was going to be on this podcast. Didn't know all this stuff. And it's because I was able to surrender, but also manifest. It's the blending between the two.
Oh, that is the most beautiful bow you could have wrapped it up in, Emilio. That was so nice. That sums it all up. Like with your quits, you know, the quits may come at you and you can roll with the punches, learn what you can from them, move on to the next thing, knowing those things, and just keep flowing and don't let these quits break you. They can, if, you know, like you said, especially when the quit happened to you.
Yeah.
And that can break you. Or you can say, hey, what am I learning from this? The universe has a plan. It's pushing me in this direction. There's a reason. Let's
Yeah.
figure that out. Let's use a little hindsight, some self-examination, and then move forward.
Mm.
Emilio, I cannot thank you enough for being on the show today. This was intensely rewarding because it's like a biohacker who's a quitter who somehow worked that all together. Ah.
Yes, yes. I love the whole quitting thing. I love that you're doing that because there are so many people that, my friends included, and people I see all the time, they're just like going through the motions, wearing the masks, and not knowing their strategic type of quitting that you're presenting. So much love and respect and just awesomeness to you, and that you're starting to bring that to the world so that people can actually, like you said, quit and know that that's like a successful thing to do.
Oh, I appreciate that very, very much. Well, I hope
Love it.
anybody who needs to hear that message hears that message. And I love having a variety of guests on from a variety of backgrounds that, maybe one person resonates more with you. They're like, hey, I'm a guy, I was from the finance world. Oh,
Hmm.
this guy can do it. This guy,
Yeah.
he wasn't necessarily so woo at the beginning, but
Yeah, I know.
that's the
Yeah.
thing is I love having on guests that aren't necessarily like super hippie or super woo. Like they're just regular, professional people that realize you got to tap into that a little bit to get
Yeah.
through some tough times.
And I love that, we talked about heart math earlier. It's like what people don't know is that like a lot of the woo woo stuff is actually starting to be proven by science now, like a
Exactly.
lot, like they're able to prove all that now. So it's like
Yes.
what a wonderful world to be in, to be able to provide that. Yeah.
Indeed it is. Emilio, thank you again for being on the show.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
And for everyone else out there, until next time, happy quitting.